Welcome to my new video about the very interesting question: how dangerous is pumpfoiling? When I'm at the lake and do some pumpfoiling, many people stop by and are fascinated by the sport. For sure, the bystanders also have many questions. Besides questions like how many attempts does it take to learn pumpfoiling, or how many minutes is your longest run, also the question how dangerous is pumpfoiling is frequently asked. For sure, there are also some risks associated with pumpfoiling. It is a water sport, and like with any sport at or on the water, there is a risk of getting underwater and in the worst case even drown. However, there is also some equipment involved in this sport which also can have some impact when falling, for example, off the board. In this video, I do not want to present only my own subjective view. To have a broader view, I asked the community what their experience is. In preparation of this video, I therefore talked to 85 pumpfoilers who also then shared their experience with me. The good news first, only approximately every third pumpfoiler had so far suffered from an injury caused by pumpfoiling, and only 7% of those who had an injury needed medical treatment. Well, as pumpfoiling is a sport in that you need to work with your full body, let us dig in a little bit more into what body parts were affected by those injuries and what was the kind of injuries the pumpfoilers were suffering from. Looking at the responses which I received from my colleagues, most of them mentioned that they already had an injury of the leg. More than every third injury affected the leg, followed by injuries of the torso, foot and hand. But also injuries of the hips, shoulder, back and head were reported. It is good to see that head injuries are rare, but that may also be due to protective equipment that is used. We will come back later to this topic about protective equipment. Talking about injury, we have to be clear what we mean about that, because injury is a big word, and some people may immediately think about heavy accidents which require emergency response. But as seen earlier, only a minority of the injuries required medical treatment. The feedbacks I received about the injury type were mainly cuts and scratches, followed by bruises. There were also some people who suffered from pulled muscles as well as overexertion. Looking at those types of injury, there are for sure some injuries that could have been avoided by using appropriate protective equipment. Those of you who have already observed a pumpfoiler or practiced it by yourself will also have observed that there are pumpfoilers using personal protective equipment. I also asked in our community if they wear protective equipment and in case yes, what kind of protective equipment they wear. More than 60% answered that they use at least sometimes some protective equipment. But there are also 36% that mentioned that they will never use any protective equipment. It seems that many consider the risk of a head injury and wear a helmet. Nearly 30% always use a helmet, but also shoes and impact vests are widely used when pumpfoiling. Looking at the information we gathered so far, we know that accidents can happen and sometimes also lead to injuries. But the question how dangerous is pumpfoiling is still open. Usually we quantify that by the so-called incident rate, which puts the number of accidents in relation to the frequency you do a certain activity. Let us therefore also try to calculate the incident rate for pumpfoiling. To get to the incident rate, I asked the following questions to the pumpfoilers for my research. Have you ever had an injury caused by pumpfoiling? How often do you practice pumpfoiling? And when have you started with pumpfoiling? With the answers to those questions, I calculated now the number of sessions the respondents do per month, as well as how many sessions they did since they started with pumpfoiling. For sure, I had to make some assumptions when calculating those figures. I assumed that the number of sessions per month was the same over time and that in average 20 starts per session were done. I also assumed that pumpfoilers who mentioned that they already had an injury had in average 1.5 injuries. Bringing those responses together, we have overall 7,953 pumpfoil sessions of 85 pumpfoilers considered. Where we also had 30 pumpfoilers of these 85 pumpfoilers that already have suffered an injury from pumpfoiling. Calculating now the incident rate, we see that we have 0.28 injuries per 1000 starts. I leave it now up to you to judge if this is a high or a low incident rate. If you would like to compare with other sports, you can look up the incident rates for different sports in the internet. If you would like to get more insights from the community, may also leave your comments in the comment section of this video. But there is one more question I want to discuss here. Are there more accidents with less experienced pumpfoilers than accidents with more experienced pumpfoilers? To get an answer to that question, I recalculated the injury rate only considering the responses of the pumpfoilers who started with pumpfoiling in the last 12 months. Here we look at 1668 pumpfoil sessions with 13 pumpfoilers who have suffered an injury. What we can see here is that the incident rate is nearly double as high compared to the incident rate considering all the pumpfoilers. Hence we can conclude that the risk for suffering from an injury from pumpfoiling is much higher when you start with pumpfoiling. Having looked at different aspects related to how dangerous pumpfoiling is, we can make the following conclusions. There are some risks associated with pumpfoiling. Approximately every third pumpfoiler already has suffered from an injury caused by pumpfoiling, but most of the injuries are minor injuries and do not require any medical treatment. Many injuries like cuts, scratches or bruises can also be prevented by wearing appropriate protective equipment. In the beginning of the pumpfoiling career, there is a higher likelihood that you suffer from injury. In general, by taking reasonable precautions, pumpfoiling can be practiced in a safe way with minimized risk. I hope that with this video I could bring some more light into the question how dangerous is pumpfoiling. As the most important and for the end of this video, I wish you all a happy and safe pumping.